Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you with us today. We are at session 2 of deploying Teams devices. I am very glad that you were able to join us today. If this is your first time joining, my name is Sarah. I'll be your host today. I'm on the Converged Communications Tech Strategy team here at Microsoft. And if you've joined us in the past, welcome back. It's great to have you back with us. We are right in smack dab in the middle of our devices track this week. Today, we're going to be talking about deploying Teams devices. We have a great session planned for you today, and we're going to round our week out tomorrow. Tomorrow's our last session. We'll be talking about monitoring and managing Teams devices. So glad to have you with us today. We've got 90 minutes scheduled. I don't know that we're going to take all 90 minutes today, which we love to give the gift of time back to people. So we probably won't take all 90 minutes today. And we hope you can join us again tomorrow, same time, same place, to talk about monitoring and managing as well. Talked about this several times. If you're not already a member of the superheroes community, we'd love to have you join us out here. There are a couple of benefits of being a member. One is that you just get to be a member of the overall modern work superheroes community, where you can, it's a Yammer-based community where you can have conversations with others out in the superheroes community about basic modern work topics. If you've got questions about modern work topics, if you've got questions about maybe you're deploying Teams phone, Teams devices, this is a place to come. We've got Microsoft people who are out here monitoring and moderating the conversation, so you can ask questions out here. You can also access the decks that we're sharing by simply coming up to the file section. And our decks for this particular wave are out in the April wave folder out here. So that's just some benefits of being a part of the superheroes community. If you'd like to join, you can just click on the consent form here. We just need your consent before we can actually add you to the Yammer-based community. If you are having trouble accessing that community, I know some people are, just go ahead and email me directly with the error message that you're seeing, and we'll get that resolved for you as soon as we can. The other thing you can access is the Superheroes YouTube channel, which is where we're posting all of the recordings for all of the sessions that we've got here. So if you missed one of the previous sessions during this wave, you can see those out on the YouTube channel. And today's session and tomorrow's session will also be posted out there as well. So if you'd like to go back and watch any of those or rewatch any of those, that's where you can find them. If you missed any of those, you can find them there too. If you've got a friend that wants to watch them as well, you can share that link with them. That will take you right to the playlist directly for the Converged comms topics. So you don't have to paw through the whole YouTube channel. You can just go right to our amazing topics that we've covered off on as a part of this wave. That should be right there. Okay, that's enough about the superhero stuff. I want to keep it on here. Standard housekeeping stuff. We'll keep you muted for the duration of the session today while our speakers are talking, just to minimize disruption, but you can always ask your questions in the chat. We've got a couple of great speeds out there who are waiting for your questions, and we'll get those addressed for you. But if you are brave and would like to ask a question live, we will give you that opportunity at the very end to ask a live question of our presenters today. We will stop the recording at that point just to again, just from a privacy perspective. So if you would like to ask a question, we will allow you to unmute yourself. You can just raise your virtual hand at that time, and you can ask your question. I'll give all these instructions again at the right time, so don't panic. I will let you know when the time is right. So that will come at the end. And let's get started. So we've got a couple of great presenters for you today. We're going to dive a little bit deeper today, as usual, on our Wednesday and Thursday sessions. We do tend to go a little bit more technically in depth. I've got a couple of great friends with me here today from our Fast Track organization. Nick Baer and Jeremy Beal are with us. They're both Fast Track subject matter experts. They're going to start with an overview of Teams devices and then dive a little deeper into configuration details, some security considerations that are pretty important, and then leave us with some conditional access and compliance and policy examples. So Jeremy, I think I'm handing things off to you today, so let's get going.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take control here. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Beal. I am a Fast Track Teams SME. So basically that just kind of means that I'm not a know-it-all, but I am definitely a learn-it-all when it comes to Teams. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us here at Fast Track and we can get you the answers to those questions. Yes, that's me up in the very top with the dobak on. I am a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Among other things, I love anything that has to do with the arts, absolutely anything. I have a wife and 3 kids. We live down here in Jacksonville, Florida. And yeah, that's me really briefly. So Nick, why don't you come off of mute and introduce yourself?
No problem. Yes, thank you, Jeremy. I am also a fast track team SME and a learn it all as well. And I like to do things like collect movies, play board games, pretty much anything and anything part of the nerd and geek culture. And also, I live in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas with my wife and child. And that's everything about me. Thank you.
Very nice, very nice. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here today. So in today's session, these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a device overview. We'll bring up some important concepts. We'll talk about configurations by device type, and we'll also go over what the devices are actually. Additionally, we'll talk about some security and network considerations. We'll go over some conditional access and compliance policy examples, and then at the end, we'll have a call to action. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so before we go ahead and start, I want to start with a poll, right? And so here's the first poll. How many devices are you considering to deploy at scale? Is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? Or maybe you're just here just kind of getting some information so that you can make an educated decision for later on down the road. And while we're waiting for that, Nick, why don't you come off mute for a quick second? I just wanted to ask you a quick question. What is your favorite Teams device?
Ooh, man, that's a good one. My favorite Teams device. Are we talking about certified devices or just devices you can use with Teams?
Certified devices. Absolutely.
Okay. I will say probably my Poly CCX 500.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
Yep.
All right. So I think we can swing over to the second poll, right? And the second poll talks about time. How long do you plan? How long into the future do you plan on deploying any of these teams devices? Would it be 1 to 3 months? Would it be 3 to 6 months? 6 months plus, or again, you're just here kind of getting some information so that you can make an educated decision, and hopefully you can start to deploy some of these teams devices. All right, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move forward while you're answering the poll. I will start the session. All right, so we're going to start with the device overview, right? And a part of this is what are Teams devices? And yes, it sounds like a simple question on the surface, right? But it's not. It's what we're going to be talking about here today is we're going to be talking about devices that will extend the capabilities of Teams, right? We're not going to be talking about things like webcams and sound pucks and those kind of things, the things that are just kind of plug and play, right? We're not, those things are going to be out of today's scope. But what we will be talking about, we'll be talking about Teams desk phones, we'll be talking about Teams displays, we're going to talk about Teams rooms, and we're going to go into a little bit of depth in that as well. And then we'll talk about Teams panels as well. Those are going to be just some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Right, so I'll go ahead and move forward here. All right, so this is what I like to call the pillars, right? So we have these pillars, and if you're looking from the left all the way over to the right, and we can walk through those as they are. So with Teams devices, we have the concept of shared devices, and then we have the concept of personal devices, and we'll get into what that means very shortly. But if we're moving from the left to the right, we can kind of couple the first two pillars there, right? We're talking about Teams rooms on Windows and Teams rooms on Android. Those are pretty much a shared experience, right? But when you move a little bit over to the right, a little bit more, we have Surface Hub, which you can use Surface Hub as a personal device or as a shared device. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as well. We'll talk about panels and what is a panel, and how do you use a panel, right? We'll also talk about Teams phones, as you heard already. One of Nick's favorite certified Teams devices is one of the phones. That can be either a shared device or it can be a personal device. And then last on this list is Teams displays, right? Those can, again, those can be either a shared device or they can be a personal, excuse me, a personal device. Just really quickly, one of the on the note of the display. Those are really big with executives. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but executives really like those because you can pull up everything on the display from a Teams perspective, and it saves time on the desktops, right? So that's kind of just a little tidbit about that. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward here in a bit. All right, so we have the concept, like I said, of personal devices as opposed to shared devices. So I want you to think of the personal devices as something that you'll sign into with your user account, right? So, I would sign into it with jeremy.beal@bealstreet.com. That's how I would sign into it. But if we're looking at the shared devices are a little bit different, right? Because it's not just going to be one person in specific that's going to be using that device. So we need to be able to make it so that multiple people can log into that device, or so that multiple people can use that device more specifically. So for something like that, we're going to use resource accounts. We'll kind of get into how to set up resource accounts. We'll brush the surface of that at least, right? But we'll get into exactly what that means here shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this. All right. So Microsoft Teams devices for shared spaces on Windows and Android. So what we're doing is we're becoming more and more vendor agnostic, right? When you're focusing on shared spaces, customers have the choice of whether or not they want to deploy on Teams want to deploy Teams on Windows or on Android. Again, we're becoming more and more vendor agnostic. We're also becoming more platform agnostic as well. Generally, Windows will come out with the features a little bit first. I mean, let's be fair here. Windows has been our flagship product for many years, and so because of that, we're able to come out with the updates on Teams with Teams devices. Probably anywhere between 3 to 9 months ahead of the Android platform. Part of the reason for that is just because we lean on our partners and we lean on our OEM vendors as well to basically to build the image, and then to make the image compliant with our standards. And we'll talk about that in a bit as well here. All right. We have these pillars, right? And we're going to move from left to right. And realistically, if you're looking at this, we have these personal devices here, right? So a personal device, that's going to be stage one of figuring out exactly what it is you want. Do you want a personal device, or do you want a shared device, right? Some of the things that you can do with a personal device is you can use a phone for a personal device, or you can use a display for a personal device. Unfortunately, you can't use a room for a personal device, right? That's a shared device. But you can use a shared device. You can use a phone as a shared device. You can use a display as a shared device, and additionally, you can use a room as a shared device. So once you figure it out, one and then two, then you can go through and then you can go to pillar number 3, right? Yeah, for the most part, the majority of these in pillar 3 are going to be shared devices, with the exception of having Surface Hub as either a shared device or a personal device. And then once you figured all of that stuff out, then we've got the panels. We also have the panels. We additionally have the intelligent devices as well, right? Like content camera. That would probably be one of my favorite peripherals. That's Team certified. If you're really looking to elevate your collaboration from within a meeting, intelligent cameras and content cameras specifically are going to be what's best to use there. All right, so we're going to talk about some important concepts here. I mean, the important concepts are really going to be in and around what are Teams certified devices, right? And you heard Nick earlier, he asked about certified devices or just devices in general, right? Well, certified devices are just this, that we put these OEM vendors, we put their product through a number of very rigorous tests, right? Because we want to make sure that doesn't matter what OEM you go with, the end users are going to have the same experience at the end of the day, right? That's our number one goal. We want consistency across the board. So we give them the specs that we want them to build the image to. And then when they build the image, they come to us and they say, okay, we have this image. Can you check it out for us? We put it through a number of tests, right? Because again, we want to make sure that we're having the same experience regardless of the platform or regardless of the vendor that you're using. I want you to take a note at everything that says click here. You can actually click on that, and it should bring you to those pages that will teach you about those device certification information, right? And so we have certified devices on certified Teams rooms on Windows, on Android. We have Surface Hub. We have certified Teams panels, certified Teams phones, and then certified Teams displays. Clicking on those links is going to be your best way to get the information on that. And additionally, if you need any information after that, or if you need something clarified, you can always reach out to us here at Fast Track. All right, here's another important concept that we have. So don't freak out, right? You see all these management portals, and no, you're not touch all of these portals every day to manage your team's rooms, right? Or to manage your team's devices. But what we do here is we have a lot of these admin centers are going to be set it and forget it, right? Like the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and the Azure Active Directory portal and the Exchange Admin Center and the Microsoft Endpoint Manager portal. Those are going to be set it and forget it, right? You're going to set the policies, you're going to set all the parameters, and then you're going to forget it, right? The three things that are on here that you will be touching, and you won't have to touch them all every day. And realistically, you shouldn't have to touch them at all for the most part, unless you're just monitoring things, right? Those things are going to be the Teams Rooms Pro portal, the OEM management portal, the Teams Admin Center, right? And so you can manage your Teams rooms. You can manage the Teams rooms through Teams Admin Center. Most of the OEM vendors that we have, I believe actually all of them, they have their own OEM portal, and there's things that they can do in there that are specific to their product that they put out, right? And then at the end, if you have Teams Rooms Pro, you can use the Teams Rooms Pro management portal. It's absolutely amazing. There's so many things that you can do there. My idea there is, my suggestion there would be to go to the Teams Rooms Pro portal and mess around in there, see what you can do. See, see all the bells and whistles that you have available to you. Licenses are required for that piece. And if you have more than 25 Teams rooms, then from 25 and on, it's going to be mandatory to use Teams Rooms Pro. Teams Rooms Basic is only from 1 to 25 units. Anything over 25 units, you're going to need to use the Pro portal. All right. Okay, so here's three additional concepts as well. These are the ones that I call crawl, walk, run, right? So in the crawl phase, which is the design phase, that's where you're getting all of your basics, right? And if you think of a little kid, when a little baby is just learning to crawl, that's when they're really starting to find their stuff, and that's really when they're starting to understand, how things work, right? Well, that's the design phase when it comes to Teams rooms, right? And so this is where you're going to create your standards. This is where you're going to leverage the certified devices. You're going to talk to all of your OEM vendors, and you're going to really reach out and gather as much information as possible. But not only that piece, but you're also going to go through and you're going to map out exactly how you're going to implement all of this stuff that you're implementing, right? And then when it comes to Teams rooms, you're going to want to make sure that you map out everything so that when it comes time to implement, which is stage 2 here, which is the walk piece, it should just be just that. You should just be able to walk through, right? You should have all the understanding that you need when it comes to what it is that you're going to do and how you're going to implement this, right? And that piece should essentially just be a walkthrough. And then you get to the run phase, right, where you're up and running, right? And that's when you're going to go into the monitor phase. This is where you're going to use things like quality of experience reports, and you're going to use the QER PBI templates. those are absolutely amazing. And what those are is we've set it up so that you can use Power BI, you can download a set of templates, you can use those templates to understand what's going on in your environment, right? That's one way. The other way is you can use call analytics. So if you go into the Teams admin center, and then you go to users, and then once you go to users, you click on a user, and then you can see their calls, and you can see whether their calls were good or whether their calls were bad. Each of those scenarios has its use case, right? You're going to use call analytics if it's just one or maybe 3 or 4 people that are having a problem. But if there's a problem in the overall environment, you're going to want to use the call quality dashboard, which is the QER PBI templates. All right. So now we're going to talk about configurations by device type, right? We're going to go through a number of devices. We're going to talk about what's needed to implement those devices as well. So let's go ahead and get started on that. And the first one up is Teams Rooms on Windows, that is. Teams Rooms on Windows. So the first 4 that you see here, and again, I'll back up just a minute here. Make sure that you're clicking on all of these click here's so that you can gather all the information that we're presenting here today. And then you can get it in its fullest as well. So getting back to the presentation here, if we're looking at the first 4 that are on here, I consider those mandatory, absolutely mandatory. If you want a successful Teams Rooms deployment, you're going to do the first 4, and there's really not much of a way around it, right? You're going to want to create the resource account. You have to with a Teams Room. You're going to have to set the Exchange resource account policies. There's certain things that you're going to have to do there, right? You're going to have to set up the calendaring and set up the auto accept and those kind of things. Password expiration, you're going to want that disabled. Teams Rooms license assigned, you have to do that, right? That's just one of those things that you need to do to be able to use that device and to be able to use that device using the resource account that was created in the very first link there. Everything else from here is what we call best practice, and I want to kind of make sure that I talk about what best practice means. So best practice these days, because we're working in the cloud these days, right? It's no longer the days of Windows Server 2000 or Windows Server 2003, where best practice just meant that you can get around things by either creating a group policy or editing the registry. It's not like that anymore, right? These are the things that you need to do to make sure that you're going to have a much better experience as you move forward with your deployment, right? And so assigning a phone number, that's a huge thing, right? If you want to be able to call out from the Teams meeting room, you're going to need to assign a phone number, right? And all the work that you can do in Azure Active Directory, setting up the dynamic groups and setting up security groups, and then setting up the Intune policies and setting up conditional access, and all of that stuff is really, really good to have. And I promise you, if you do all of these things, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. All right, so we're going to continue with this phase here, right, for Teams Rooms on Windows. Again, these are some of the things that are going to make your life a whole lot easier. So, going back to the days when I was a customer and I was setting up Teams Rooms, I did all of these steps, right? I made sure that I set the proxy settings. I made sure that I deployed certificates. I named all of my MTRs starting with a certain nomenclature, right? I didn't use MTR, but I was new at the time, right? I didn't have this kind of a forum where somebody could speak to it. So, I just did CONF dash, but that works. MTR dash serial number, that works as well, right? And so these are, again, some of the things that will make your life a whole lot easier as you move forward. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Teams Rooms on Android. And notice that the first 4 here are the exact same. And those, again, are going to be mandatory. Teams Rooms on Android only has one slide because, there's only so many things that you'll have to do in the Android area, with the Android platform to make sure that it's working correctly, right? We don't have the layer of the Windows appliance on top of it as well. But at the end of the day, this is what we have, right? And the first 4, again, are absolutely mandatory. You have to put in a license. You have to make sure that the password doesn't expire. You're going to have to set the calendaring. You're going to have to create the resource account. Again, not necessarily in that order, but you're going to have to do all of those things again. And then kind of rinse and repeat as far as the rest of it from the Windows slide. Yes, if you're going to want to be able to call out, you're going to have to assign it a phone number. You're going to want to review the authentication best practices. You're going to want to. The one thing that is different on this slide here is the Android device administrator that needs to be enabled. So let's talk about that just really briefly here for a second. So in the Android OS, that's on your phone, that's on your tablet. The device administrator is no longer there, right? That's not a thing anymore on those devices. But because of the way that we built it, and we are making changes, and we do have changes planned for the schedule, but device administrator needs to be enabled, and we've instructed our OEM vendors, our OEM partners, to make sure that they have Android device administrator in there. That comes in really important, specifically when you're creating Intune policies, right? You just need to make sure that you have that on there and that you have it enabled as well. And that's really going to be how you're going to manage bringing in to your environment. That's how you're going to manage bringing the Android device into your environment. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. And on this next slide, I won't be presenting this. I'm going to turn this over to my good partner and better friend, Nick Bear. Take it over, Nick.
Yes, thank you so much. So, similar to the Teams Rooms on Windows checklist Jeremy covered, we need a resource account, and we want to configure the resource account mailbox properties to our liking, just like Jeremy mentioned. Maybe we decide that for the Surface Hub, we don't want to automatically accept meeting requests, or maybe we want to accept meeting requests, and we also want to send a unique automatic email reply with guidance specific to the Surface Hub. You can even get more granular with Room Finder, which lets you populate information about your rooms, like which floor they're on, how much capacity there is in the room, and you can use tags to define additional info such as coffee makers, conference tables, etc. This makes it so much easier for people to find and schedule rooms, especially people who may not frequent the office. And you'll see, like Jeremy mentioned, as far as the resource account, setting the Exchange resource account policies, the password expiration is disabled, and the Teams Rooms license assigned. You don't want the password expiration because a lot of times if it expires, then it's going to sign out of the device, and somebody's going to have to be there in order to be able to put the new password in. And in the shared devices, that's not the recommendation. And when we talk about, and then for the Surface Hub, it also uses the Windows 10 Teams Edition, which is a special version of Windows for this purpose-built collab device. With that, you can do some other customizations outlined here in the checklist. So check out the last few guides. We're linking to for steps on how to further customize your Surface Hub. The Surface Hub does report into the Teams Admin Center now, so that's a great addition. You can do things like view the health of device, remotely reboot, sorry, or download logs, etc. So for the Teams panels, it uses a resource account as well. So you don't need to do the first four steps again if you already did them for your MTR for the Teams panel. The panel display events on the outside of the room. Another really interesting thing you could do with the resource accounts tied to these panels is you can actively use existing app setup policies in your Teams Admin Center to add additional apps to the display on your Teams panels. That opens up things for all sorts of creative applications. For example, you can use the Create a Survey app together with user feedback, or maybe an app that kicks off a Power Automate flow to report an issue in the room. And you'll see across a lot of these devices, a lot of the things that we recommend are going to be around going to be the same. So when we talk about, the resource account for it, so that way we can tie licenses and everything to the to the machine itself. Set the Exchange resource account policies, your password expirations, like we talked about, the Teams Rooms license assigned. And then, for your Android devices, your Android device administrator. And then you have all sorts of other things as far as your Intune and Azure Active Directory groups and your conditional access. And then we start getting into phones, like I was talking about. One of my favorite is the PolyCCX, just to kind of play around with. So that way I can play around and pretend I'm just hanging up the phone as opposed to just clicking a link. Our Teams phones run on Android, and they can run in a few different modes. The first one we'll talk about is CAP, or common area phone. Think of it as a phone during doing a job, maybe a phone in a reception area, lobby, kitchen. We have to create a resource account for it and keep a few things in mind. It needs a name that makes sense. So look at things like naming conventions, start thinking about a targeted management approach for these devices moving forward. Differences between Teams Rooms and the Teams Phone is we have some other policies that we can customize, which are the IP phone policies for the specific phones for the features that you want to leverage. So you may want to leverage the Hotdesking features for some of your common area phones. You may not want people walking up to a common area phone in a public area and searching your address book for your CEO and calling them from that phone. You can turn that off. And you may want some phones to have a different interface depending on where they are physically located in your organization. All the functionality can be adjusted via the IP phone policies. Your password expiration is not supported in a common area phone scenario. If the password expires, the token expires, and the phone signs out like we talked about. We do want strong passwords and some monitoring on the account. We want to leverage conditional access to secure the accounts as well. More on that later. And I really love the doc around the authentication best practices for personal versus shared guidance here, because it gets into how to use device filters to help us exclude these shared devices from policies applied to other devices. And then we talk about the Teams Phone personal. So we talked about the common area phones. Now we're talking about the personal. For personal mode, we don't need to create an account because you're signing into the device with your existing account, like Jeremy talked about. So therefore, all of your licenses, all of the functionalities for your phone, Teams phone license capabilities come into play for this. So you don't need an additional account with additional licenses and everything that comes into play with that when you're assigning a phone to a personal user. So you're using your own personal credentials to sign in. And again, we do need to review the authentication best practices for personal versus shared to make sure that we're targeting the intended conditional access policies to the intended devices and users with capabilities like device filters. So as far as the Teams displays, when we're talking about the Hotdeskings, this is a ThinkSmart device. I've got two of them actually, and there's a new display such as the Neat Frame. You would create a resource account and license it. You can run it in a Hotdesking mode, which can be on a shared desk. I could book the resource by sending an invite to it. Then I walk in, and I temporarily signed into the device, and it gives the visitors to your shared spaces some flexibility and control. And you'll see here, there's the resource account, a lot of the same steps. As far as the phone number assigned, when we talk about that, that is talking about, that's kind of like an optional feature. If you want to give the device the capability to call out, obviously you would need all the features and the PSTN functionality to do so. So we're talking about having the phone's license, Teams phone's license. We're talking about being able to assign the phone number. We're talking about the ability to give it the PSTN functionality to sign out. So whether you're talking about calling plans, Operator Connect, or you're talking about direct routing, that's just an additional feature that you can add on to the devices themselves. And then as far as the Teams displays, so we're just talking about the Teams displays in a Hotdesking scenario. Now we're talking about the Teams displays in a personal scenario. And here's a neat frame. This is a Teams display running in personal mode. You would have your credentials, your calendar, it's your device, your chats. People can walk up to it and leave notes on it, which that may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you are. It runs Android, so it needs to sign in and enroll using the device administrator if we want to leverage the benefits of Intune. So the device admin who is responsible for Teams may not be responsible for conditional access, and they may not be responsible for Intune as well. So before you start enrolling in all these devices, make sure that the IT admins are responsible for those different areas and have access to the various portals, understand the business requirements, and know our best practices and supported policy settings. And we're going to now expand on that when we're talking about security and network considerations. So we touched on this a moment ago, but here in the security considerations to help drive those conversations with your security teams for the resource accounts, if you enforce password expirations, they'll sign out. MFA through another device, this gets very messy really quickly if you do this. And traditionally, unless this has changed, a lot of times we don't recommend MFA, especially on those shared devices. So we get into things like conditional access based off of approved IPs, approved locations, things like that to help lock that device down. So that way, in case somebody picks it up, takes it somewhere else, and tries to plug it in, it's not going to work. So instead of leveraging other capabilities of conditional access to secure the accounts. Exclude resource accounts from the user conditional access policies. That means that we create separate policies. So your Azure Active Directory team can use naming conventions to target these accounts, treat the resource accounts differently than user accounts. Device filters can say treat model X differently. Remember, these run in a lockdown kiosk mode without access to Google Play Store, etc. So security is different. So device filters are great for Android and Windows device. As far as when we're talking about the local device security, change all of your local passwords during setup, and that goes for both your Android and your Windows-based devices. Keep in mind that some of these Android-based devices have web interfaces, and we don't want people remotely accessing them with default passwords. How to change that in bulk? You can use a configuration profile in the Teams Admin Center for Android devices, or talk to our OEMs to see what tooling that they can offer as well. Teams Rooms performance we test with Defender, so don't install other antivirus security or monitoring apps. You may have global admins managing all of these devices, but it might make sense to have a few separate device admins scoped only for access to specific devices. Leveraging admin units. So we say that our New York IT admins can manage New York devices. There is kind of an asterisk on this. I've had a customer working with this currently, and I would kind of review and take that one with a grain of salt, considering a lot of it is not necessarily managing the devices as much as you're adding the accounts that are signing in those devices, so that way it can show in the Teams Admin Center for that specific admin that's managing the devices for that specific location. So I would take that one with kind of a grain of salt. I know that they're implementing that here recently, but it may not function the way that you're wanting it to, if that makes sense. And then the call out on the two specific links at the bottom. So, which is the short link for aka.ms/mtr security. Use these to you can use these to showcase the security features built into these devices for your security team's conversations. And then the network connectivity requirements and considerations, as we're talking about, it talks about the different devices that Jeremy and I have talked about. So your Teams rooms on Windows, Teams rooms on Android, Surface Hub, Teams panels, Teams phones, Teams displays. it talks about the requirements and considerations for each of the different areas and the different functionalities. And most of these tie back to our standard networking connectivity principle docs, which is, the aka.ms/PNC. We do want to bypass proxies whenever possible. I also want to call out the Microsoft Store and Windows Update reference here, which are particularly important for MTR on Windows and Surface hubs. Then we get into talking about conditional access and compliance policy examples. So if you're new to Intune, at a high level, our Intune is our cloud-based endpoint management solution that provides device compliance through configurable policies. With Android, you are signing in with the company portal, which is effectively the front end to our Intune enrollment. We control that by the assignment of an Intune license. For Windows enrollment, you can leverage the standard Windows 10 IoT enrollment process. You can use a device enrollment management or DEM account. You can also automate using a provisioning package. All of that is in the link at the very bottom here. The best guide on how to manage enrolling your MTRs into Intune. Here is the good news. If you're new to Intune and you're thinking, hey, I just want to get some conferencing rooms going here, why do I need to learn Intune? You can leverage the Fast Track team. I have counterparts who are dedicated to the Intune, like I'm dedicated to the Teams, and they're amazing SMEs standing by to help you set up your Intune enrollment best practices. So I'd recommend taking advantage. And most of the time, whenever you come to the Fast Track and you're saying, hey, I want to talk about using Teams devices. I want to talk about setting up the Team side, the Intune side, everything that goes with that. Most of the time, you're going to get a Intune SME and a Team SME. So that way we can talk about both sides of that fence, and you get the benefits of both of those. And I've worked with customers in those scenarios, and they've been very happy as far as learning who, what, when, where, why they can do or what they can't do, and kind of peek behind the curtain, maybe see like what's coming, maybe what do they know. But it's a very good resource. I'll recommend that. And then when we talk about the conditional access with the Teams devices, so if you're new to conditional access, at a high level, think of it like a series of if-then statements, or even a checklist that acts as a gate that must be opened before access is granted. For example, if a user wants to access company resources, they must complete an action using the Authenticator app on their cell phone. For a shared device like an MTR to gain access, we can look at other signals like which IP address the device is coming from, like we talked about. Is it a trusted location, like we talked about? It's all defined by configurable policies, and that's why it's so important to have a naming convention for your resource accounts to help you differentiate and target the right policies to the right users and devices. I've had customers, and I've talked to them about this. Hey, make sure that you have specific naming for auto attendants, call queues, the devices, all that stuff. So that way, whenever you're going and you're trying to automate this and make it as easy as possible and the easiest flow throughout your setup of Microsoft 365, depending on which different areas that you're focusing on, it's a lot easier to understand that versus, hey, I forgot it because we didn't put CA or AA in front of this, so I didn't target all of my conditional, all my call queues, auto attendants. I don't know which ones are MTRs versus users, and they run into a lot of issues. So it's one of those proper planning, slow, smooth is fast. So conditional access with Teams devices, we only support certain things depending on the device type. So it's important to plan your access strategy around the account type being used and the device type. Make sure that you have the right policy scope for the right job for the right account. When you're configuring your conditional access policies, use the what if tool we provide so you can see which policies are actually being applied during your validation. That comes in handy later on for troubleshooting as well. Here's another short link to remember. So aka.ms/Intune MTR. That's a fast way to access both tips at the very bottom of this slide. This is a great link for IT admins with access to Endpoint Manager Admin Center and your Azure Active Directory Admin Center. They can look through the tables to see what policy settings are supported when building out the conditional access policies and device compliance policies. We really want to make sure that people with access to create those policies are aware of what is supported and what is not supported, like I talked about before. Otherwise, we're at risk of situations where devices don't sign in at all, unexpectedly sign out, and are other unexpected behaviors. I've seen admins that get into issues. Hey, I set up this MFA or set up password reset, and then they find out after multiple hours dealing with support, troubleshooting, testing, that it's not supported, and that's the reason why they're going through a boot loop nonstop in the MTR or whatever device that they're handling with. So this, when we're talking about shared devices, conditional access, the Windows device, let's have a look at examples and think about your access strategy. Again, shared Windows devices, we recommend looking at trusted location. Put a list of IP ranges that you want the resource accounts to signing in to come from. With this example, we're leveraging trusted applications and device compliance. So we're saying when we see a sign-in request, it has to be marked as compliant and has to be coming from one of these locations, or it's not signing in. It's not getting in to be able to do what you want it to do. So shared Android devices is going to be similar to the previous Windows example. This time we'll leverage device filters. Like we talked about, hey, I want to have this specific device sending in from this specific location, or however you want to do it. In this example, I built an Intune compliance policy that says if root devices block it. None of our certified devices run rooted operating systems. So we know we don't want that signed in. If it's marked as not compliant, it's not signing in, it's not coming in. You can use these device scoping filters to say, I want to have a policy that only targets the neat frame Teams displays, or the Poly CCX phones, like I talked about, or audio codes devices, etc. You may have separate policies that are targeting other devices, especially if you have a BYOD strategy. And again, we can leverage those scoping filters to help target the right policies to the right devices for conditional access and compliance. This gives us a lot of flexibility and keeps us out of trouble where we do not want accidentally enforce unsupported policy settings on certain devices. So this could be an example of a configuration for Teams certified IP phones or Teams displays, similar to the previous shared Android devices example, except in this case, these aren't going to be in a shared devices AD group, but we're still filtering against particular Android device models, and we're still requiring the devices to be marked as compliant. There are many ways you could do this. These were just some examples to give you some ideas on what's possible whenever you're looking at the different policies, you're looking at the different devices, you're looking at the different use case scenarios, personal, shared, and depending on how you want to manage that. So this slide notates a bunch of resources, additional short links, things that you can use when you're going about your Teams implementation journey, and what things you're looking to be excited to implement and maybe change or maybe add in addition to what you already do in your environment. So I will go ahead and pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming to see us.
Thanks, Nick. I think I'm the next speaker. Hi, it's me. I'm the next speaker. It's me. Sorry, guys. I am very punchy today. Thank you, Nick and Jeremy, for that. I know I'm no Taylor Swift at all. Really appreciate that great information. This is a favorite topic for a lot of people. There are lots of people who are in the process of either deploying Teams devices or planning to deploy Teams devices. So we got lots of requests for this topic. So hopefully the detail that was shared today, it was helpful. These resources that you see on the screen here are also incredibly helpful when it comes to planning and or if you're in the midst of deploying as well, in terms of being able to navigate this whole process. So these slides that we shared with you today, of course, they're going to be available. We'll get those posted out on the Superheroes community for you as soon as we can. So please make sure that you take advantage of these and get those saved to your favorites, to your wherever you need to put them, and make sure that you're taking advantage of these. I'm just going to take control here so I can advance the slides. We are going to transition into Q&A here. And I see, Richard, you've got a question. So in the queue here, so I'll make sure that either you can unmute yourself and you can ask yourself, or I can just reiterate the question if you're not comfortable. So get ready to ask questions if you would like to ask questions. Before we do that, I just want to remind you, we don't have anybody here today like we did yesterday. Martin came to talk about Fast Track, but I do want to remind you, if you would like support when it comes to deploying devices, Fast Track is here for you. So if you're ready, if you need support, if you need some help, folks just like Jeremy and Nick are here to support you through this journey. So if you'd like a little bit of a lift, Microsoft is here for you. So go ahead and fill out the form that you see on the list here, and we'll be here to give you that extra helping hand and that white glove support. So let's transition to Q&A. If you would like to ask a question today, we'd love to hear from you.